Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're feeling Ugandan. I don't know how many of you have tried our borders in Kampala. I wish you did, but you still have more time. I would propose that instead of using buses to go back to our hotels, we can use some borders as we. I had a challenge. Last night, I interacted with one South African who told me she can't even climb up the border. I was surprised. I thought these are everywhere in Africa. But to my surprise, it seems like they're only meant for Uganda. That's our culture. That's who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the delegates, the researchers in this room, I've also realized there are many professors in the building. It's so hard to find one who is not a doctor or a professor here. But if you look closely, I'm one of those that are not. Yes, we've had a powerful 3-day session as we've been discussing about research, more into AI, and seeing how best we can build our economy. And we are delighted to have been hosted by the ARUA, the African Research University Alliance, hosted here in Makerere University. So as we prepare for our final critical session, let's take a moment. Let's look back at what has really transpired over the past 3 days of this 5th biannual international conference. From the very first beginning, our theme has been research, innovation, and artificial intelligence for Africa's transformation. This has guided us in a number of topics that we've explored from day one through the opening ceremony. We've had parallel discussions, the roundtable discussions, and a lot has been achieved and discussed. What we have seen, what we've learned is incredible. Actionable insights across the 3 core pillars: the power of responsible AI and local data, the urgency of collaboration, building the next generation. Ladies and gentlemen, even as we were discussing more into artificial intelligence, last evening we had more of the natural intelligence from the Ndere Culture Center. How many of you enjoyed the moment there? Who would like to give us a try of one of the dances that happened? There were quite many. The dances that we saw were actually from our region here and some from Burundi, but we can try some from the central region, or maybe we can go up to the north or even the western region. At least a name, you can give me a name. But thank you so much. And another thing I realized about professors is that when it's 10 p.m., it's actually so late for them. They need to go and sleep. Me, at that moment, the energy was high up, and I thought maybe we were going to explore some of the local clubs around. To my surprise, everyone wanted to go and sleep. We had more energy. But ladies and gentlemen, that was mostly about yesterday. But today, yes, we are still together with you, and we have a lot prepared for our last session. So at exactly 4 p.m., the program has been shifted. The roundtable and wrap-up that was supposed to start at 4:30, it's going to start at 4. And this will be chaired by Professor Nana Abba from the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. Then later, we shall have the closing ceremony and evaluation statements from Professor John, Secretary General of the ARUA. Then we shall have closing remarks from the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, that is Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. And then we shall have Professor Sizwe Mabizela from the Vice Chancellor, Rhodes University, and Chair of the ARUA Board. It's exactly 4, and we are going to start off with our roundtable and wrap up of this discussion. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, join me as I welcome Professor Nana Abba, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. She's going to be and the Vice Chair of the ARUA, of the African Research University Alliance. You're most welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Are we tired? We are almost there. We are almost there. Thank you for staying with us through to the end. And it's my honor to moderate this final roundtable, which is a wrap-up of this year's conference. We've spent these last few days not only exploring what AI can do, but also imagining what Africa must do with AI. Now, as we close, we reflect on the lessons, challenges, and commitments that must shape the next steps. What we seek to do in this final session is to harvest the lessons, identify priorities, and chart a bold course forward for ARUA's collective action in research and innovation and its intersection with AI. Now, to help me do this, we have a distinguished panel. Our panelists represent leadership across research, innovation, governance, and policy. And so I'd like to now invite them to join me upstage. I'd like to invite Dr. Nomakwezi Mzilikazi, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation, and Strategic Partnerships at Rhodes University. Please join me. The next person I would like to invite is Professor Ssali, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of our host university, Makerere University, and she's also the Director of the ARUA Center of Excellence on Notions of Identity. And she hosted us last night, gave a beautiful speech. The next person I'd like to invite to join us is Professor David Asamoah. Professor Asamoah is Pro-Vice Chancellor at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And when you hear Kwame Nkrumah, you know it's in Ghana. He's an expert in logistics, digital transformation, and innovation systems. And not quite the last person, but let me invite Professor Oluyemisi Bamgbose, Deputy Vice Chancellor, University of Ibadan, and a distinguished scholar in law, ethics, and higher education governance. Thank you. And we do have joining us online Professor Francis Peterson, who is Vice Chancellor of University of Pretoria. Professor Peterson, can you hear me?
Yes, Nana, Chair, I can hear you clearly. I hope I'm audible.
Okay, can we see you then? Can we see him?
Can't you see me? My camera is on.
Okay, all right. Now we can see you and hear you as well. Thank you for joining the panel. And thank you all, colleagues. We have had insightful and engaging sessions and even provocations through our guest speeches at the opening, 6 keynote addresses, 3 roundtable discussions, this being the 4th and final, special panels, parallel sessions, and poster presentations. Just to set the scene for our discussion and to make sure that we are all fully back from communing with nature at the beautiful Njere Cultural Center to communing with AI issues here, let me quickly remind us of some key points from the past 3 days. Professor Johnny Gyapong reminded us that Africa's AI transformation must rest on strong institutions, data sovereignty, and ethical research systems that serve our own priorities. That Professor Patrick Okoro showed how science, technology, and innovation can drive a triply green revolution, one that is productive, sustainable, and inclusive. He did so showing how AI transforms agri-food systems and can protect our planet. Then we had a riveting keynote from Professor Vikosi Marivati, and he challenged us to democratize AI by building models in African languages from African data, reflecting African realities, so that technology truly speaks with us and not just about us. And Ms. Adama Ibrahim reminded us that policy is not a brake on innovation, it is its steering wheel. She called for robust governance to build trust, ensure accountability, and embed ethics in national AI ecosystems. This morning, we've already had 2 keynote addresses. The first one from Darlington Akogo showed the power of African creation. He demonstrated to us how he's using Moremi AI designed on this continent to revolutionize health and drug discovery. He's proved that we can be producers, not just consumers of frontier technologies. And our final keynote from Ms. Samantha Carter grounded it all in equity and evidence, showing that while AI can reduce poverty and inequality, whether it's in our education, business, task, or justice systems, we must be guided by rigorous research, continuous learning, and our respective contexts. These, together with the other presentations we have heard, affirm that Africa's AI future must be locally led, ethically governed, scientifically robust, and socially just. A future where technologies serve humanity and advances our shared well-being. Now, this roundtable is our chance to provide tangible pointers to help us translate these ideas into action. So there are 3 overall questions that are guiding us. One is, how do we embed AI responsibly in research, teaching, and governance? 2, how do we fund, regulate, and sustain it in ways that build African agency and not dependency? And 3 is, how can ARUA universities lead this transformation through collaboration, capacity building, and ethical innovation? So I'll now turn to my panelists, and they will share their reflections before we open up for a wider conversation. I don't have a microphone. Okay, I need to. Okay, so I can move and join the room. All right. That's making. All right. So let me start with you, Dr. Kwezi. How can African universities integrate AI innovation into institutional strategy while ensuring it addresses local development priorities? Remember that we are often accused that we are oblivious of the societies around us.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Prof, and good afternoon, colleagues. I think I want to start at the tail end of your question, which is about how do we harness AI innovation for development, essentially. And I think the core question there has to do with, we really have to be clear about the mischief we're trying to solve with AI. What is the mischief that we're trying to solve with AI? Now, I want to reflect on what the Honorable Minister shared with us during the opening session, which was to say, we've got to move towards ensuring that AI is for socioeconomic beneficiation of our communities, of our nations, and of our continent. And so when it comes to institutions, I think institutions need to reflect on what are the pathways to impact. Because it is when you understand the pathway to impact that you then incorporate AI innovation into that pathway. One pathway that I have found to be particularly useful is that of engaged research. Because what engaged research forces us to do is to co-create research questions and to co-create knowledge, which is then, because of the very nature of its design, responsive to local challenges. And at the end of the research process, you've got better chances of uptake of your research results, of your research outcomes, and of trust, which is an issue that Professor Marivate touched on quite a bit about how do you involve communities and how do you ensure that there is trust emanating from your research process, which incorporates AI. Then I think once you have figured out the mischief you're trying to solve, which is your pathway to impact, whether it's economic, whether it's social, whether it's political, then you turn to AI innovation and you say, how can AI help us do this better? How can AI help us do this faster? How can AI help us do this effectively? And how can AI help us scale? So at the heart of it, I think embedding is around ensuring that your research and innovation questions are sorted out, they are co-created with communities. And then how they fund exploration in institutional strategy is around research and innovation, it's around community engagement, but it's also around teaching and learning. So if you attend to your 3 academic missions, you've got a very good chance of embedding AI innovation into strategy. I am wanting to touch on the teaching and learning bit, but I think what language.
Thank you very much. So essentially, I will come back to you. So essentially, we need to identify the mischief we're trying to solve, and we need to co-create knowledge from scratch. Right. Now, let me turn to you, Sarah. And yes, you're coming from the perspective of inclusion, gender, and identity issues. So I'd like to ask, how can we ensure AI systems reflect Ubuntu values, i.e. centering human dignity, community, and identity, especially in the face of ported models? You don't want to go down that path again.
Thank you. I think I've said, okay. Thank you very much for those questions. Yeah, it's about how we can ensure AI has centered human values. First of all, maybe we need to recognize that there's nothing really very essential about human values. And when we talk about Ubuntu, we assume a particular kind of Africanness, which could also be debated. So for starters, yeah, it's good to know that human beings, or there's a certain Ubuntu is more of a desired pathway than assuming that there's a particular aspect of Africanness which is different from other people. But what we know is that when human societies are going through particular stages in development, and they are less modernized. As we know what modernity and progress looks like, people tend to bond more together. And so the more we advance, the more we progress according to Western values, the more we shall see less of issues like Ubuntu. But what exactly are we saying? We are talking about the centrality of things like dignity, things like community, aspects of identity, aspects of caring for one another, which actually should be an aspiration. So when we ask the question from there, and the question then is, how do we ensure that AI actually reflects that? We have had an interesting 2 days where issues of sovereignty have come in, where issues of whose knowledge is being privileged from AI are key issues. In my session just before lunch, we were talking about techno-colonialism and the need to decolonize AI for Africa's transformation. So there is an assumption of thinking that because technology is neutral, it's machines that are learning, and machines can't be biased like human beings, therefore everything about AI is neutral. But in my panel today, in our workshop, this actually was debunked, because they said machines don't have minds of their own. Behind the machine are people. So, and we know that knowledge comes from a particular knowledge system. So what is the knowledge system that is giving birth to the content that we see in AI? That knowledge system is not value neutral, it is not independent, it is not. So what we mainly see, it is a privileging of Western knowledge being passed around as universal knowledge, as independent knowledge. And I think that's one of the things we need to be aware of when we are talking about AI. Most debates around AI is about use, it's about access, it's about inclusion. And of course, everyone is singing about, oh, we need to go to Africa, because Africa, that's where the youth is, that's where the market is. And of course, Africa does not have as much digital penetration like other continents. So it looks like it's a good thing for everyone to be coming to Africa for AI. But if we are not intentional about it, as the minister said, we could actually be creating more problems. So what is the intention of coming? And as your question goes, how do we center values of humanity? How do we center values of dignity? How do we center values of community? For starters, we have, of course, the access is welcome, but we need to question the sovereignty. At what point are we including African knowledge in AI knowledge systems? And after that, we also need to question, if we are including African knowledge systems, how are we doing it? Is it just translating and making the machine able to read and translate from a local African language to another? Or are we actually encouraging Africans to participate, or encouraging, putting the human values of Ubuntu at the center in this, so that it's not actually, so that we do AI and digital penetration so as to capture Africa as a market, so that then they can buy more techs and more. I think that should not be the thing. The issue, if we're talking about inclusion, if we're talking about collaboration, we've had a lot of panels speaking about inclusion, collaboration, equitable collaborations, equitable networks, and most importantly, sovereignty. How do we protect local and indigenous knowledge? I think if that is done, then we can be sure that whether the communities are African, Ubuntu, or there are other global South communities, AI is not seen as another medium of extracting resources from Africa, like we had before with the first level colonialism, where the extraction was really raw materials and human resources in the terms of slavery, and now it is through markets, through things like technology. And that's why we had our panel on techno-colonialism, because it looks like it's the new frontier. So how do we guard against this? A lot of what we've discussed here, if we paid attention to it, it would help us guard. So we have to be intentional and not assume that AI is value neutral. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the key points there, we should not kid ourselves. Technologies are not neutral, and what we feed into our AI systems are extremely important.
And maybe just to say that agency, the agency of others need to matter in whoever's propagating this. Let us not appropriate their agency and think for them and think we know what's good for them. the key point is how does it add value to the life of these societies that is penetrating into? Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Peterson, I'll come to you in a moment to talk about research excellence and how we can leverage on AI, so for tangible societal transformation. But before I come to you, let me go to David. So David, from your experience in digital transformation and supply chain innovation, what lessons can universities draw to scale AI solutions beyond pilots into national or even continental systems? Remember, yesterday we heard that pilots don't fail, neither do they scale. But what we need to do now is to scale up.
Thank you, Nana, and thank you for your question. Number one, I want to say that AI is nothing new in our environment. We've been using it. I mean, if you look at in factories, and foreign countries, the robots that they are using are all AI in one way or the other. Even in our environment, we sit in our cars and you leverage on Google Maps to take you to wherever you want to go. You want to know the distance to your destination. These are all forms of AI, so it's not new to us. And for we in Africa, we normally say that we lost out in so many eras of our development. We lost out in the Industrial Revolution stage, and we have seen time and time again that help us leapfrog to catch up with our developed partners. Now, going back to your question of how the lessons that we could learn, to scale up, I will say that once again, establishing the fact that AI is an information systems tools, they normally have characteristics that they ride on. And I will say that the number one lesson that we can learn from as universities is that number one, we should be scaling up from ecosystem perspective. And what do I mean by that? If you, from even the conference for the past 2 days, you hear that a lot of universities, agencies, ministries, institutions I will say that number one, we should think about, and I think ARUA can lead this charge. Look at all the universities. What are the systems that are in place? How can we bring them all together and synchronize them to get one big AI platform? And that is the number one charge. We should have an interoperable system, AI platform that can move from, normally we say from the beginning to the end, and really get a lot of output from it, instead of this looking at it from silo perspective. So that'll be the number one. Number two, I think a lot of the speakers spoke about it. It's got to do with the governance. I mean, if you have to scale up, we need to look at the governance. What is the national framework system that we can put in place to take advantage of the benefits of AI? And once again, ARUA can lead the charge. I mean, and we are talking about national frameworks because normally the fear of using the system is that it can do these negative things and that. But then if you put a national framework in place, then we can be sure that all those naughty things and the negative things can be stemmed out from it. I would say that as universities too, we should think about incorporating these AI tools into our teaching and learning and administrative operations. Then finally, I'll say that we should, in a way of scaling up, how do we go about it in terms of implementation? In information system, we normally will advise that do a phased implementation as a big bang, as against big bang. And what do we mean by phased implementation? I may take one region, you take one university, you take one ministry, I may put them all together, try it, get to know the weaknesses, fix it very well. Then eventually you move on to another region to continue with that. So those are the 4 key areas, key points that I would say that we can use to scale up ecosystem thinking as against silo thinking. Number 2, we should look at our governance, put in some national framework that will guide how we use the system. Number 3, we should look at implementing it in the entire system that we are using in our ministries, in our universities, then eventually look at the way we implement it, phased as against Big Bang. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Thank you for those 4 pointers. I'll return in a moment to the issue of governance with Yemisi. But let me go online and Francis, if you can hear me, I would like you to take up the issue of research excellence and teaching and learning a bit more. And my question is that building on ARUA's collaborative spirit, how can we leverage AI for both research excellence and teaching and learning? We heard a lot about teaching and learning and how our students are using the AI, whether appropriately or inappropriately, during this conference.
Yeah, thank you very much, and advantage to sit through the conference there in person. But I have listened to some aspects of the conference. Before I respond to your question, I just want to put the way that I look at AI